We'll fuck all the dice, bring worlds to life. Masters of the dungeon cutting like a knife. Heroes, villains, lord, share. Learn the craft, magic in the air.
Welcome everyone to Masters of the Dungeon, the podcast where dungeon masters get deeply nerdy about the game we love. I'm Nacho, and as always, I'm joined by the mighty glue stick himself, Mr. AJ Pickett.
Hello.
Each week we're going to be joined by a special guest, and today we're thrilled to welcome Vahid. He's the dungeon master and producer behind the D&D livestream show Dice Legenz. Welcome, man.
Hey, so good to be with you guys. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The honor is ours.
So, before we dive in to today's topic, tell us a little bit about Dice Legenz.
Okay, well, Dice Legenz, as you mentioned, I'm from New Zealand, and it's a live stream show on Twitch, and we're also producing more and more content for YouTube. So what we do is we are a studio-based Dungeons and Dragons actual play show, filmed from a studio here in New Zealand, and our cast and crew all come from the TV and theater world. So they're all professional actors and TV presenters, or camera people, or in my case, I was a music composer and still am a music composer from the media world, cartoons, that kind of stuff. And we all get together taking all this kind of TV experience and have made sets and got cameras and lights. And we now tell these great stories because a lot of them are improvisational actors as well. So that's what we do.
That immediately raises many questions.
Bring them on. I'm ready.
Ask away.
So that aspect of improvisational acting and things, I've always been a proponent of. There's many different types of D&D. It's not a one size fits all, and there's like the difference between an at-home game where you're just sort of sitting around the table with your friends, or a convention game where you don't know who's going to be sitting down at the table and you have to be careful about, themes and things like that. And that sort of improvisational theatre sport for entertainment play, like Acquisitions Incorporated and Critical Role and that sort of thing. Scripted or unscripted, or an interactive event that you're inviting audience participation, or that sort of episodic campaign play that you have, which I think in many ways is it's a really good way of showing what a campaign can be that goes past 10 episodes or 10 sessions or something like that, and you can get like high level characters and things like that, because so often, as was the Coast pointed out, not often will characters go beyond 10th level in a home game. So it's really interesting, because that's where you get to explore really long campaigns and things in that sort of format. But it's a different type of game to the people's home game. So that's an influence that I find very interesting. It changes the culture of the game. So are you like mindful of that?
Oh, for sure. Look, so Dice Legenz is a company, we're a registered company, and we've got investors in that whole business, right? It's and so when doing it, we deliberately set out that we needed to have cast members as opposed to players, because anyone can learn to play a game of Dungeons and Dragons, right? 50 million people around the world have learned how to play Dungeons and Dragons. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one is able to perform, even when you're feeling like trash, in front of a live audience, and have that kind of improvisational spark. And so we knew that we needed performers, and we also wanted performers that were good at improvising, and that also represented like the beautiful diversity of humanity found in New Zealand. So we've got Maori, Samoan, Filipino, Pacquiao, European. Anyway, so we actually auditioned people.
That was going to be my question. Yeah, did you audition? Sorry.
No, sorry, I jumped the gun.
No, you go. No, you go.
So we went through a process over a few months of asking people quietly, "Hey, do you know someone that might be good at such and such?" And then we compiled a list of people, and quietly looked them up on their their actor website pages and all that kind of stuff. And then when we thought we knew who we wanted, we contacted them. And the very first person is someone that I've worked with in the television world. His name is Ronnie Tolafo. He worked on What Now and a whole bunch of other TV shows that I worked on. And so he was the first person that got on board. But yeah, we then auditioned a whole bunch of others over the next handful of months and got a cast. And we wanted to make sure that we had 2 women, 2 men, and then myself. So yeah.
Did you have to like screen test them together as well? Like you're actually to see if they had chemistry?
We did do some. We did get when we had individually interviewed each of them and talked about this, because 3 of the people had never played Dungeons and Dragons before. Only one of the cast members had ever played before. So
Mhm.
3 of them were brand new to it. So we had to explain what the whole thing was about. They had no idea. And so then once we thought individually, these guys are great, then yes, we brought everyone together and we did some brainstorming around character, around setting, around all that before we got into them making their characters, let alone filming anything. And then after that, once they'd done all that, then we did some screen tests as well.
So, did you make characters in combination with your designing a campaign? Was it a very integrated?
So what we did is, so when we in that first kind of gathering of everyone together, we talked about what the aim of the show was and what the spirit was, and then I presented as part of that a couple of broad campaign ideas. I wanted them to be set in this land of called Aratai, which is like North African, Mediterranean, Turkish kind of place, non-Eurocentric. I wanted it to be non-Eurocentric so it would stand out from the Eurocentric kind of games that most of us have played most of our lives. And then so I presented some. I said, this is the setting that I want it to be in. Here are some broad storylines and concepts that we could pursue. And we threw around a couple of ideas, and the one that they were all the most excited about is a campaign where they were all lowly town guards. They weren't heroes, they weren't epic dudes, they were ordinary Joes on the beat that then become the heroes of Aratai.
I love it.
Mm.
I love it.
Yeah.
Is it sort of a contemporary D&D technology, or was it like RuneQuest with sort of a Bronze Age Mediterranean feel?
We used D&D 5e, but I wanted it to be a low magic setting.
Okay.
And so in this setting, magic is rare and is dangerous. So sorcerers are illegal.
Ooh.
If you're
Ooh.
not trained wizard, you are breaking the law if you use the wizard, if you use magic. So warlocks, if you're getting power from a pact, dude, you don't belong in this city legally. Get the heck out.
Right.
Right? And
Okay.
so warlocks and sorcerers, yeah, you can be it, but you're going to be against the law. Yeah. And that makes a whole bunch of other cool things. Like then there are sorcerer hunters. And, anyway, I'm digressing massively.
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah, before we get into today's topic, we're going to talk about creating immersive home worlds. But before we dive into that, I've got something. I'm going to call it the Dungeon Master backstory, where I'm going to explore your ideals, bonds, and flaws.
Fun.
The core traits that shape you as a dungeon master.
My background. Love it.
Yeah. Right. So let's kick it off with your ideal. Is there a core philosophy that shapes how you approach being a dungeon master?
Man, that's a pretty tough question, isn't it?
Mm.
What's a core philosophy for anyone? Look, I think that there's there's a couple of things that I really like. One is this: I like the idea that anyone can be a hero. That it doesn't require massive muscles or you don't need to be a billionaire like Batman. You don't have to come from another planet like Superman. Anyone can be a hero. as long as they are self-sacrificing and make noble decisions. And so I like stories that are around that. And so I like to create stories where where players can be heroic without it being cheesy.
Mm.
Another core philosophy, I guess, other than this concept that anyone can be a hero, is I think um, it's kind of tied into that, and that the that I do believe that there's an inherent nobility in humanity. We can do terrible things. There's no doubt about that. Humanity can do awful, 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 awful things, but we can also do incredible, great things. And so that kind of approach then goes to players as well, thinking that, well, these players that are playing are noble beings. They are, anyway, that's very philosophical. I don't know if we wanted to get that deep
Yeah.
into philosophy,
So
but there we go.
no chaotic evil campaigns.
Oh, look, actually, I don't mind doing that at all. But if and we've had players that have come in as guests playing evil characters, and I said, yeah, bring it on.
Yeah.
But you have to know that the world, fair enough, is going to be against you. Right? You may not survive. So, but
Nice.
yeah.
That's a good answer. All right, let's dive into your bond. Is there part of being a dungeon master that you feel especially connected or passionate about?
I guess something that that AJ mentioned before was around the whole improvising thing. I think that one of the things that I really feel connected and passionate about is I love that basically what we're doing is improvised storytelling. Oh, let me try again. Collaborative, improvised storytelling. That's basically at the heart of what we're doing, right? And so I think those three things are what I feel passionate about. I feel that it's collaborative. This isn't a place for a one show pony.
No.
Yeah, this isn't a I was about to use Michael Jordan as an example, which is a very bad example because actually he wasn't completely show pony. But anyway, I'll move off that. It's not an Usain Bolt. There we go. All right.
Right.
This isn't a thing for single superstars.
Hey, we're nerds. We don't understand sports references. But yeah, I'll take your word for it.
Okay. So first of all, it is collaborative. That we're building this story together, and it's improvised. I love it that you don't actually know where it's going to go. Even in a pre-made module, the players can go off script, right?
I don't think I've ever had a module go the way it's intended to go.
Yeah.
I'll get past like the first or second sort of scene, and then they'll miss some vital clue or something like that, and then I'm improvising, and it's just off to the races after that.
Yeah. I had a session just last week where, for the story, the players really, really need to go to this one place, and they really just didn't.
Yeah.
So now I'm having to think, all right, now what do I do?
Yeah,
because they need to know that information.
Not only that, but the sheer diversity in characters that you can have these days differs remarkably from the original Dungeons and Dragons sort of format. You had kind of cookie cutter character classes, like an elf was a character class and a race sort of thing.
So good.
And these days, how do you plan for that? How do you even make a challenge rating system for that? I've noticed in the latest Dungeon Master Guide, they've just gone back to straight experience points totals, which is clearly designed for the BTT, and I think it's a terrible system to put into the DMG. Templates would have been a much more logical thing for me, but I'm just obsessed with monsters anyway. But yeah, it's like how you don't even know how many members of the party there are going to be or what equipment they have and things like that. So how do you balance anything? So it really comes down to what is an appropriate challenge and what's going to tax them without killing them.
Oh, and the other thing is I think something that's helpful, that I find helpful, is to just preface with players at the beginning. Guys, there will be some encounters in this that you're going to find really easy, but there are going to be some that you really should run away from.
Yeah.
And then that's a blanket, right? You've covered yourself.
Yeah.
All right.
And also, player character death is one of the most memorable experiences that you'll have in the game. It's the anecdotes that you'll be telling years from now about, remember how my character got like baked in acid and I cried. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to teach your players fair, which
Yeah,
is the reason I've run
a
Tomb
little
of
bit, a
Tomb
little
of
bit.
Horrors 3 times, and I don't think I've ever got past room 5. It's a team building exercise.
Yeah. It's like, can you remember your first character, AJ? No. Can you remember your most memorable
Um,
character death? Oh yeah,
I think
yeah.
I think we all cut our teeth here on the red box, which is
Mhm.
Totally. Yeah, I
Mhm.
did too.
quite a unique thing. So
Mm.
okay, your floor. What is one part of your DM style that you're currently trying to improve or refine?
Well, there are many flaws, so I'm so thankful that you've said one, so I can hide my shame. One thing that I'm trying to well, look through doing this show, I've reached a stage where I'm happy with the improvising aspect of it. But I love the story and drama, and sometimes exactly the fine details of spells or things like
Mm,
that, I get wrong.
yeah.
And when you're doing things in a public arena, there is bound to be someone goes, isn't it 120-foot range? You know?
Actually, yeah,
Actually, I think you'll find that wall's too thick to teleport through, you know,
yeah,
and stuff like that. It's like, oh man. And so comments in YouTube like, that build that you just made, you didn't take into consideration, blah, 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 blah. You know, so it's that kind of thing, those fine details, which to be honest, I
Yeah,
actually don't think matter at
yeah,
all.
yeah,
Mm.
Because that's not what the story's about. Anyway,
yeah. Take any of the like Forgotten Realms novels, and there's always something that the author has taken liberties with anyway. R.A. Salvatore is notorious for this. Like Guinevere is way beyond a figurine of wondrous power, and they've adjusted her lore to sort of
yeah,
accommodate that. Like teleporting a being with her to the astral plane. A figurine can't do that. But it
yeah,
really, really won in the story. It was fantastic, you know.
yeah,
So
that's right.
trying to avoid spoilers for anybody who's going to read all those books.
yeah, no, I hear you with spells. I get overwhelmed with spell. Like, yeah, just
Yeah.
sometimes if a monster's got, it's when it's like, what spell do I use? I've got to probably use the best one first because in 5e, he's not going to probably make it to the third
No,
round if I do.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's my beef with this baby here, the Pathfinder's 2 core rulebook. I mean, look at that.
That's
How
insane,
am I
brother.
supposed to, like, half of this is feats. How am I supposed to remember all of that and how
Exactly,
they
man.
combine? Goodness sake.
I actually had a situation where one of our players, you know, and remember these players, the only D&D experience they've had has been on our show, right?
Mm.
Which means they've in almost 2.5, almost 3 years, they've played actually quite a lot of D&D, but it's all been with 1 or 2 characters.
Mm.
So in a new campaign, in the current campaign that we're in, our 3rd campaign, story arc, someone was playing a new character. It was a monk. Well, I didn't know the mechanics of monk very well. They were a Way of the Shadows monk. And in the live stream, I told the player, no, you need to do this and this and this this is how the teleporting works when you go from shadow to shadow, shadow. And I got it totally wrong. And of course, everyone else in the world knew, apparently, but I didn't. So yeah, because I'm a DM, I don't learn all the player options. I kind of assume that they.
So you'd have a different feedback. I have a player at a table, whereas you'd have a comment section.
Exactly.
Did you
Exactly.
monitor? So do you monitor that comment section while you're live streaming, or
No,
is it
no. Oh wait. Well, yes and no. We have two types of streams. Our kind of flagship shows, ones that we want to eventually that we want to put up on YouTube. We don't interact with chat in those shows, other than before the show, at halftime break, and at the end of the show. We talk to people at those 3 points, but when the game is on, because we want a YouTube audience to be able to experience it without the interruption of thinking, who the heck are they talking to?
Right. Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
Then, but then there are other shows that we do that are designed to take the most advantage of Twitch's live interaction. So, for example, in a week and a half, we have a live stream show which is Chat versus Cast, where the cast members are playing 3 evil characters and the chat are playing 3 heroes, and it's going to be a big bun fight between them.
Yeah.
Well, in
Wow.
that case, we want the live audience to be in there and making suggestions and dissing the cast members. We don't want full involvement.
Where I'm catching up with Regan from Get Dicey at some point, and I know in his live streams on Twitch, he has a mechanic in there where a player can introduce a monster by enough donation. Like he'll just randomly, like basically an audience member can donate a monster to the campaign. Like this monster just shows up because which
so
is
that's a whole different type of D&D there. I'm gonna buy an element of the game. That's
So when we do these audience interaction ones, we have a menu basically saying this many subscriptions, this element will happen, and this, and they just become more and more insane. Because we're a business, we want to encourage people to be generous to us from the business point of view, but we also want to have opportunities for the audience to genuinely feel that they can influence what's happening on screen.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Should we dive into today's topic?
Yeah, love it.
Okay. Creating immersive homebrew worlds. Aratai is
close. Aratai.
Aratai. I knew I was going to stuff that up.
Aratai.
I practiced so many times before the show. Don't mess this up. So this is your key city in Dice Legenz.
Yeah.
Just tell us about the setting.
First of all, I shouldn't have made a name like Aratai because, it is really, you look at it and say, how do you pronounce that? So I apologize for that.
No, it's fine.
So, okay, you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Aratai is a grand walled city, the largest settlement known on the planet, with more than 1 million souls within and spilling over its thick walls. So Aratai is a peninsula, a city. It's a city-state. Like we say, Rome wasn't built in a day. We don't just mean the city Rome. We mean Rome, the empire. And similarly, Byzantine wasn't, or Babylon. Babylon was a city, but also Babylon was the empire. So this is a city-state, where Aratai is kind of a place of palaces and paupers, of vice and virtue, of temples and hovels, a place of extremes, where the world's trade goes through, because it's an incredibly important trade point between continents. And so it's kind of like, I was really inspired by reading history about Constantinople, which is now known as Istanbul. So Constantinople was called the city back in the Middle Ages and the medieval times, and they said, if you stood in one place long enough in Constantinople, the whole world would walk past you, because it was this junction between Asia, Africa, and Europe. It was a hotbed of political intrigue, of commerce, and of warfare. And I was just fascinated by this mega city. It was called the city because it was. And so Aratai, in many, many ways, is inspired by that city. And so, and in choosing to place it in a big city, one of the reasons that we did that is because for a show, it means that the subplot elements are close to the characters at all times. If the players are moving on a journey, then all of those beautiful NPCs and subplots get left behind. Their love interests, the debts they owe, the gambling problems, the sister who's gone missing, all that kind of stuff gets left behind. But if you're in the same city, it makes it easier for me to interweave those elements because they're always as present as we want them to be.
I was just going to use that metaphor, that it's the threads that weave into a tapestry that build the rich background mural of what's going on and ties the characters into the setting so they get invested in what's going on, to the point where the adventure like they look forward to going back from wherever they've gone to. I love that. I think that's what they're trying to capture with the bastions too, is to give them an anchoring point.
That's exactly, and I love it. So, like, our first story started off with these idea of these four lowly town guards, right? It was called the Heroes of Aratai. But we've had a couple of smaller series. One was called Spies of Aratai, which was a small thing which is focused on a couple of spies that are dealing. Another thing is called Shadows of Aratai, which is around some of the criminal underbelly. And so we can just say, and then we've just recently done one called Bards, which is all based around some bards. And so, the setting's big enough and varied enough that we can choose a small element and we can do entire campaigns in the same setting. And the audience then enjoys visiting the same locations and meeting NPCs, just like in the Marvel Universe, NPCs that cross over between the storylines. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun being able to interweave those kind of breadcrumbs.
With a population of 1 million people, that's a heaving beast of a city. That's a self-sustaining thing. Yeah, and you imagine if you're a bureaucrat or something on at that scale, every decision you make is going to have ramifications.
Yeah.
And I guess a matter of like the city would govern itself to a certain extent. There would be a certain anarchy or a street justice sort of thing going on, and the classes would really be strata of business on their own, and not interacting with each other.
Yeah.
So how do you ensure consistency and depth in the world and lore and history there?
Yeah. So, our core cast, because they were there from the very beginning, kind of have it really stamped in their minds. Other than one of our cast members, as I mentioned, the other three had never played D&D before. So the only D&D worlds they know are this world, right?
Yeah.
And so their whole, right from the beginning, they're forming this, they're helping to build this world. So for them, it's pretty easy. But to establish that at the beginning was the important thing. And I think so in terms of so I guess in making sure that there's consistency, first of all, is I do document things, right? So I use an online tool called World Anvil, to document things to make sure that player NPC names are consistent and some of the basic geography and all that kind of stuff. So documentation. But then in terms of depth, I think it's about inviting others to be part of the building of the world. There's only so much that I can think of.
Do you have it mapped out as well on World App?
Like the in terms of physically mapped out?
Yeah.
So we've got a very rough map of the city that we have a detailed map of the continents. But the city itself, we have just very rough ones. And the reason for that is I don't want to be tied down to locations. One of the things that my brother's a very keen and clever Dungeons and Dragons player. And one of the things he said is that, maps haven't been accurate throughout humanity's history. Just because it's on a map doesn't mean it's correct.
That's true.
And so for the maps, we don't have a full map of the city Aratai, although we probably will get there someday. But at this stage, I don't want people to be tied down by, on the map, that looks like it was 5 hours yesterday that you said it took there, and now you're saying it only took half an hour. So, yeah.
Yeah. World Anvil is really good for that because you can put key points on a map and type in the lore and things like that. And as you say, it's good for that threads and weaving a tapestry thing where you can add and add and add to World Anvil. So that it becomes almost a hobby in and of itself, world building through that sort of a thing. And that's, I think, one of the traps of the beginner DM is to over plan before the players even hit the scene, and they're just they're overloaded with so much. One of my challenges with being a dungeon master over the years, particularly recently, has been the awareness of how much mental energy people have, how much attention they can spend on things. Mainly with myself as I get older. I'm an old man. I if you talk at me for an hour or two, I'm going to have a nap.
Good thing we do a podcast then.
Yeah, for an hour. 3-hour podcast? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I really get that. And using those tools, and I think whatever works. Like I used a combination of just notes and pads. I'm a habitual collector of notepads and things like that, and half of them are full of old campaign notes, which I love to go through
Yeah.
and just remember.
Players love dungeon masters that turn up with like so much a book full of exposition about their world as much as we love players that turn up with a 10-page backstory. We're just going to sit there and just bore each other to death.
Yeah. Yeah. You hit on that you've got the new players there and I found it really my advice for people who are starting out a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons is get a new bunch of players who've never played that game before at all the previous editions and learn the new edition through their eyes. Because they'll hit on the key points a lot faster than you will. You'll be blinded by your expectations or your habits, and quite often miss. Like for instance, in fourth edition, how important the intimidation skill was a real eye opener for me. That
Wow.
they could just avoid combats entirely, and that really, it blew me away.
Cool.
Okay. How do you get your players invested in the world and encourage them to create characters that feel connected while still giving them agency to shape it?
So, um, what I currently do, and this is through trial and error. So I have had a couple of times when I've had guest players come into the world and they've created characters which just do not fit.
Hmm.
Right? That they're, anyway. So,
Warlocks.
actually, I love it. I love it when people make warlocks in my game. I think it's great because it suddenly means that they're going to be in a lot of trouble. They're going to be running.
The wizard police are after you.
But like for example, this Aratai is a very human-centered place. So when someone turns up and says they want to be an elephant creature, internally I go, "Oh no! Oh what? No, that's not what it's supposed to be like." So what I've
I feel
by the
you.
way, yeah, but I have no problem with games like that as long as that's the focus of the game, right?
Yeah.
But this is quite it's an epic, heroic, serious game, and having I don't know. I don't want to offend anyone. So
No.
It makes sense. It's that's sort of buying into the premise of the story. It's like there's yes, you can have that character, but you've got to have the expectation that the setting itself is going to react to you in a known way.
yeah,
And me having to put that aside as a dungeon master just to give you the experience that the rest of them have is unreasonable and selfish.
yeah.
Because you're forcing the game to conform to what you want, and it's not collaborative.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I have two. Yeah, brilliant. So I have two quite different kind of experiences of learning that depending upon whether I'm DMing for our show or DMing for like a pro DM or a social game.
Mm.
So for the show, it's quite different, right? A show needs certain characteristics for it to be successful. You need to have at least one character that the audience will actually like. Okay,
Right.
Right? If they don't like any of the characters, they're not going to watch. So there needs to be at least one person that they feel some degree of empathy for. Anyway, so the process that we do with our show now is I tell them, here's the setting. All right, here's the setting. Here's the general kind of story. So I might say, this is going to be a heroic story. Or our second campaign, this is an anti-heroic story. You can make nasty characters in this one. It's an anti-heroic story. And then we do some brainstorming as a whole team about the kind of things that might happen in this in terms of character concepts and blah blah blah. And then individually they go away and they come up with a few concepts. And then I talk with each of the players, the cast members, about the concepts, and then I say I like this one or this one, and then we bounce off each other until they find that they're happy with, and I'm happy with their character. That's clearly a very different curated process because it's a show,
Mm.
right? Because we want to have relationships and reactions between the characters in a show that you wouldn't necessarily have if you're doing a bunch of friends who might feel quite uncomfortable role playing. They love each other,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's like audiences have been trained through years and years and years of watching, um, different TV shows and things that certain elements are expected, and that's the 70% familiarity that you carry the 30% of the new fantasy thing that you're presenting to them. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
And then if I'm doing a pro DM game, actually I'll do social game. If I'm doing a social game with my friends and family, it's kind of like the middle ground. Here's the campaign, what characters are going to make, and then people will usually say, I want to make a rogue," and then someone will say, "Okay, I'll make a wizard," and then someone else will say, "Well, if you guys are doing that, I'll go barbarian," and then the next person will say, "Well, okay, we need a healer in there someplace, so I guess I'll be like a cleric," right? And so it's kind of more. That's how it's kind of done. But then in pro DM games, really the most important thing is people have a fun time.
Mm.
And so with pro DM games, it's like you want to make a barbarian tabaxi crossed with an elven rabbit kind, go for it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because it's all about them having fun. It's a very different experience. Still, I
Mm.
still say this is the setting. You're going to be very, very unusual in this setting. As long as you're happy that you're going to stick up like a sore thumb, you make that character.
Mm.
So anyway, so those are the three kind of levels depending upon, what's happening.
Excellent. All right. What are some of the most important elements to include when you're building a homebrew world?
I mean, gosh, like that's one of those big questions. Like, do you start macro or do you start micro?
Yeah.
Right?
Gravity. Time.
Micro. I think start small and make your
Me
way up.
too, brother.
Yeah.
I usually start with magic.
Do you?
Yeah.
Mm.
How prevalent is magic? If you look at the different Dungeons and Dragons official settings, one of the key element differences between them is how magic works.
Yeah.
Eberron
True.
and Dark Sun in particular. And yeah, even Greyhawk, Dragonlance. Yeah. Oh wow, the divine aspect of Dragonlance is a key element. It's really what the entire campaign hinges on.
Yeah.
And with the Forgotten Realms, it's the fall of a magic your post Magic Empire.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really very very key for me.
And like if anyone who's a reader or a fan of Brandon Sanderson will know that he's all about magic systems.
Mm.
That and that magic systems work by limiting things, not giving just like there are parameters to how it works, and which I think is cool.
Yeah. And one of my favorite books, Magician.
Yeah.
You've got low magic and high magic.
Yeah.
Instinctual. Cosmic magic, and yet the wizards, the hedge wizards, are the ones who get. They're the employed court guys, and then when the real wizards come along, they are in charge of their world, pretty much.
Yeah. There's Omega. All right.
Yeah.
So I think that when talking about important elements to include in a homebrew world, I think there does need to be some kind of hook. What's getting the characters out of bed in the morning, right? What is it what's going to motivate the characters to do something? So the characters, of course, we want the players, to have enough internal motivation that their characters are going to want to do something. But I think there still needs to be a hook, a threat, a something, like whatever that is. And then like Newton said, I think start small. How does that hook impact on ordinary small people, and then work up from there.
Mm.
So like if it's like in our first story, the heroes of Aratai, um, an epic, a legendary sword is needed to vanquish a lich, basically, but it is tied to the dreams and memories of one of the cast members, of one of the characters.
Mm.
So there needs to be some kind of hook that the characters are going to want to pursue. Because otherwise, if you want to have a sandpit world where everyone can do anything they want anytime, that's cool. But if you want to follow a story progression, I think that
Yeah, I've mentioned a few times. There was a forward that I wrote for Through the Feywild trilogy, which is how important objects are in the Feywild and how they're always related. And like story is a matter of physics in the Feywild. So, like for instance, in Labyrinth, Jared the Goblin King is as trapped as Sarah in the Goblin world. He can't escape either, but she can if she just realizes it and lets go.
right,
Essentially, this has no power over me, and she's free.
yeah,
And a big part of that is the peach that makes her forget, which
mhm,
is the scariest thing because she's being drawn into and becoming trapped like he is by the world.
yeah,
So yeah, something as simple as a coin showing up. For instance, in one city, I had were-rats that were running a cabal of people who were being bribed by a coin that mysteriously showed up. They didn't know where the coin was coming from, but it would regularly show up, and occasionally a note, a demand was attached to it. A simple little task,
yeah,
one
cool.
little thing, all they had to do, and they'd relied on this coin for so long. Yeah, it's like, oh man, I need that coin.
Nice. Do you think like a checklist that a DM should go through of like, this is how the political structure works, this is how magic works, this is how the gods work?
I think they're very handy.
Yeah, I think that I agree with what AJ said before. I like to figure out the scope of the magic. And but one of the things that I describe to players is the how the difference between low fantasy and high fantasy. So I say, for example, Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf is like really powered up, he's riding on a horse and he basically casts an overpowered light spell,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? And he chases the Nazgul away with a daylight spell. That's what he does.
yeah.
That's his big power, right? He doesn't throw, he doesn't teleport, he's not casting lightning bolts, he's not raising people from the dead, right? Yeah?
I think he
Yeah,
used heat
yeah.
metal on
Yeah.
uh that's about the most spell-like spell he's done, apart from like just the staff itself being a force projecting thing. Yeah.
I think there's an article somewhere that Gandalf was a third level wizard.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And so there's that level, and then on the others, but it's still epic, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
And then on the other scale, we've got like the World of Warcraft movie, if you ever saw that. They've all got like emeralds the size of your fist embedded in the hilts of their swords. They're all riding griffins. They've all casting these portals the size of the World Trade Center to move entire nations through. It's like, so that's a 10.
Yeah.
And so, right? And so one of the things I like to say, okay, guys, for this, we're aiming for the heroes of our time. I said, guys, we're aiming for a 3. Okay, if Lord of the Rings is 1,
Yeah.
this story is a 3 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because then you have somewhere to go as well. Then when you come across big, mega magical things, they're like, dude, whoa!
Yeah.
If you start at 10, where the heck are you gonna go?
Mm.
I was just
Yeah.
reading, recently read Dragonlance again, and I remember there's this big thing in the beginning of the book about how Rastlin is such a powerful mage, and the only 2 spells he uses is Sleep and Magic Missile.
Cool.
Yeah. And he almost died to get him. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's permanently messed up.
Well, one other thing I will mention around including when you ask the question about what you think is essential to include in homebrew world, as well as magic, I do like to have a kind of a grasp on some political stuff, but I don't like to go in too deep necessarily. But something I think is really handy is the opposite, and which is what are the limitations of the world? If we're trying to do everything at once, I don't think it doesn't think it has as much of a hook.
Mm.
Like if we think of like Star Wars, the worlds in each planet in Star Wars is a very specific, limited
Yeah.
biome, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is not only the tree world, this is the giant tree world.
yeah.
Yeah,
This is the all jungle world, or this is
Yeah,
the
exactly.
desert. Like you have to work your ass off all day scavenging just to get food world.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think it's quite nice to think, okay, what are the limitations of this world? What are we not doing in this world? Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
like you've done with your setting, is such a cool idea. Just sorcerers are illegal. Like wizards have to be registered. Just a simple idea like that immediately knocks out two classes out of the player's handbook. Doesn't knock them out that they're not off the table, but these come with different risks.
Yeah.
Just a simple twist like that is really cool.
Some of the most interesting sort of additions through 5th edition has been introducing the Magic the Gathering world settings, which have been really refreshing. Theros was a real breath of fresh air. Dungeon Dad, for instance, is obsessed with Theros. Yeah, and I'm more sort of love the world city idea. Yeah, because we haven't seen anything like that in Dungeons and Dragons before. An entire like a Coruscant type planet. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like that it's full of worms, but I would have been more happy with it being a dungeon world. So it's organized all the way to the core.
I also
So, yeah.
sorry, one other thing is I think I like for a campaign for it to lean towards a school of monster or a school of challenges or foes. So like one of the Pro Diem game campaign that I run is really around the death of an elven realm and the battle between elves above ground and elves below ground. And there's actually enough in D&D for a whole campaign to be set around Drow.
Mm.
And the ecosystem and the planets and the monsters. A whole campaign can be set around that. We don't have to try to include everything. We don't need to throw everything in there. It is enough. And so or like if it's a dragon centered one, there's definitely enough around dragons and kobolds and things like that. So I guess not if one's building a homebrewed world, not to try to pack everything into every place, I guess.
Yeah. Forgotten Realms is often described as the kitchen sink setting where everything's thrown in there, but it's got a lot of really, as you say, you can set an entire campaign around. Like for instance, orcs. There's the Spine of the World orcs, which is the oldest population of orcs. They've got a portal that they came through a long, long time ago, back when the giants were fighting dragons and stuff, even before then. Tied in with the origin of like when Lolth first visited the world and Moanda was trying to take over the world from Grumsh. And then you've got the Thayan orcs who came in much, much later. And they're much more sort of civilized because they come from one of the 6 different orc homeworlds. And people are like, what? There's orc homeworlds? It's like, yeah, as a matter of fact. So yeah, you ask like Eric L. Boyd or something like he's a stunning sage of the Forgotten Realms. He knows more than Ed does. So yeah, it's just I got to ask him about that sort of stuff when I was researching where the orcs came from. Are they native to Toril? That sort of thing. And he just gave me a little snippet, and I was like, yeah, an entire campaign.
Forgotten Realms, I reckon if anyone wants to pick up a campaign in a world that's just ready to go, that's where I'd turn to.
Oh yeah.
Forgotten Realms is so good.
It's 50 years of literary history. That's why I get so hot under the collar when I see it getting truncated in the latest editions, which is like, they make a selling point of the DMG. It's got 90 points of lore. Oh, really? You can step this way to my 700 videos. Thank you.
Okay. What advice would you give a DM looking to create their own homebrew world?
I guess, like you said before, Newton, starting small. I think start it around your characters. Talk with your players first. See what they want to do with their characters. Okay, so they want to be from a family of halflings that have run a bakery business, but they're wanting to get away from it. All right, well, what about that family can we start to build a world around? Right? And another character has a half brother that's been gone since birth. Well, why are they gone? Were they pirates? Were they slavers? Were they taken off on a ship? Were they part of a military? And I think starting with the player characters, I think the players are such a rich way to help create the world. To start with there. But the other thing I would strongly recommend is don't be afraid of massive change in your perceived storyline. Like if you're doing a homebrew world, you probably have, if you're anything like me, an idea of where it's going to begin and an idea of where it is possibly going to end. You might have some visions of like final confrontation or the final villain. Don't be afraid or surprised if after a few sessions you have to scrap all of that and start again.
Don't be precious with your darlings.
Yeah. Be ready to throw it all away and just roll with what comes up, because it will actually be better than what you previously had planned.
Yeah. Like Luke Skywalker starts out as a farm boy on Tatooine, and he ends up being the son of the big bad guy of the galaxy, pretty much, kind of.
Yeah.
And there's no way you could have planned that at the start of the campaign, or maybe it was.
He ends up being a hermit, drinking milk from the udder of a.
There should have, like, if the entire series was really designed that way, it should have started off with him milking a desert rat or something like that. A theme that carried on. Yeah.
Like in the show that we've got in our first campaign, this Heroes of Aratai, at about the 15 episode mark, they had the characters had a confrontation, which I didn't think they were going to do. They went on a rescue mission, which I had clearly signposted, very obviously that it was an impossible mission, and they had agreed that they were going to do a subterfuge, sneaking in, taking the blah 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 blah. But then one of the characters, when they saw one of the NPCs, got all hot under the collar, and they all decided to attack. They knew that was going to kill them, and then they got 2 nat 20s in a row, a nat 20 on top of a nat 20, and they killed the big bad guy. We're a third of the way through the season, and they killed the big bad guy. What am I going to do? Cheat? I could have cheated. Instead, I had to go, well, there went the whole campaign. And then I had to think, well, where is this story actually going then? If it's not going to where I thought it was going, where is it going? And the end of where it then morphed into and changed to was so much bigger and more beautiful than I had thought. It became so much better. So that's why I say don't be afraid of throwing it all away.
Yeah, the price of success. I've had an instance like that where I used a vorpal sword and got a natural 20 and cut the guy's head off. And that was like, because there's 6 hours of campaign planning for this big fight gone down the gurgler. And he basically cheated and there's the guy, and I was just like, well, I feel my agency has been taken away. I was like all glum through the rest of the game, and we all learned a lesson that day that the dice are occasionally idiotic.
The dice have a story.
The dice occasionally spit out a full work of Shakespeare unexpectedly. Yeah, you can never tell.
Kind of tied it back to your core philosophy again.
The dice.
That's your advice.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't mean to.
Gone full circle. So.
I also like the idea of like the price of unexpected success. If you kill the big bad guy and you're like, 7 in one blow, I'm just a farm boy, I'm not actually a superhero.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, well that's it. We'll tie it up there. So thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to check out Dice Legenz. You got anything else you want to plug at all?
I guess the thing that mostly want to plug at the moment is, although we've been live streaming on Twitch for 2.5, approaching 3 years, we really are moving content more towards YouTube, and we're just about to launch in the next month or two our first specifically YouTube-only series. It's a series called The Bards of Aratai, and it's around 3 bards, and they are 20 to 30-minute episodes, um, edited with extra sound effects and music and visual effects. We've employed a visual effects artist, so every time one of the characters says "Thunderwave," we see a Thunderwave on screen, and we got it's looking really cool. We've got extra miniatures shots. The filming of those miniatures shots happens just tomorrow. Anyway, that's happening on YouTube really soon. And what we'd really love is for people to check out our YouTube channel, subscribe now, ready for when that comes out, because it is such a great series.
Shit,
And
you had me at 20 to 30-minute episodes. I can't do 4-hour-long Critical Role. I don't care how good it is. Man, yeah.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, thank you. Thank you on behalf of everyone with an attention span or a life.
That's why we're going for 60-minute podcasts now.
Yeah.
Podcasts are different, right? Podcasts are different because you can carry them with you, right? You're listening, you're going for a walk, you're in the car. Good. Watching a show for more than 20 to 30 minutes is difficult for most people.
Yeah. Unfortunately, nobody will ever see how truly attractive we really are. But,
I have a face for podcasts.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You got anything, AJ, to wrap it up?
We're still looking for a catchphrase to end the episodes. Have you got any suggestion?
Gosh.
We sort of naturally segue to the 2 Ronnies. I don't know if you're aware of the 2 Ronnies.
I knew the 2 Ronnies, yeah. I was born in America, but I moved to New Zealand when I was 13, and the 2 Ronnies were on when I came here.
Yeah.
Your North American audience won't know who you're talking about, though.
No.
Hey, well, look, thank you so much, Newton. Thank you so much, AJ, for inviting me. It's been real fun hanging out with you guys. I've really enjoyed it.
It's a pleasure. We honestly just do this to keep Newton sane on Mondays because he has really hard times at work on Mondays.
Mondays is my worst day. So yeah, appreciate it. All right, thank you, and it is good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night from them and me. Bye. See ya.